What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Rift Rewind and ESPN ESPORTS League of Legends program. It is championship weekend in the LCS and LEC, and we are here to break it all down. Arda, Tyler, Emily, Jacob, all with you. 90 minutes live. Thanks for watching us on twitch.tv/ESPN ESPORTS, on the ESPN app, on Twitter, and also on YouTube. You got any questions? Throw them in Twitch chat. I'll be watching it all show long. We include you. We love including you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of the ESPN esports community. We got a lot to talk about. Yes, the LCS MVP was recently just announced within the last hour or so. We will get to that a little bit later on. Also, quick reminder, this is a playoff special edition of the Rift Rewind. We will also have a program on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, a 60-minute program to preview the LCS championships that will be happening on Sunday. Tomorrow's matchup and Sunday's matchup will be on ESPN2. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, FlyQuest versus Evil Geniuses, ESPN2, also ESPN app. On Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern as well, Cloud9 meeting the winner of that matchup, also on ESPN2 and the ESPN app, 4 p.m. Eastern start. How are we doing? How are we feeling about championship weekend? Emily, are we excited? Are we pumped? Are we jazzed up? How do we feel?
My Evil Geniuses to finals prediction still stands. So yes, I'm very excited. I'm actually we'll talk about this later, but I'm super curious to see the Mad Lions G2 rematch. And then I'm also really curious to see the FlyQuest EG series as well. Those are the two that they're both the series tomorrow, but those are the two that I'm actually looking forward to the most.
So I am already seeing in the chat talk about Doublelift. The three analysts, my esteemed colleagues, had a long conversation about Doublelift and Team Liquid, the situation there, what this means for them. That is already up on our YouTube channel. So what I suggest is after watching us until 8 p.m. Eastern time, then go find that video on our YouTube channel.
Watch Emily first, though.
I was going to say, unless you care about LPL.
You're right. That's my
It's
bad.
all good.
I'm putting money in the swear jar because I made a mistake there. Yes, the LPL show with Emily Rand will be live immediately after this. So after that show, go check out the Doublelift conversation. Let's get to the LEC. Let's take a look at the brackets. This is where we are right now. Championship Sunday. 3 teams remain. Fnatic have already punched their ticket to the final. Meanwhile, a matchup, a rematch, in fact, between G2 and Mad Lions. Mad Lions, as you recall, sent G2, shockingly, surprisingly, my goodness, how did this happen, to the losers bracket. And now the rematch will happen. One of them is going to have to go home. I got to wonder, I got to think, Emily, as we start with you here again, I don't know. They're running it back here. Convince me that Mad Lions can truly eliminate G2 from the playoffs.
After their series against Fnatic, I don't think that's the case. I think there are a lot of really interesting things to look at in the series from Fnatic's side, and I think that it's a bit closer than what the 3-0 scoreline would suggest if you're just looking at it like flat out. However, I think that Fnatic in the series actually did a lot of things that G2 like to do in the early game, where they tried to emulate some of the things that G2 really like to control, like two sides of the map at the same time. We saw Hylissang taking TP. That actually allowed Fnatic to do a lot of creative things in the early game against Mad Lions. So I think now that G2 have probably settled down after their series with Origen, which I know we're going to address later, I do think that this is going to be a pretty difficult series for Mad Lions, and I think G2 is going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, like, the biggest thing here is I see that our chat is saying Flashy is sort of alluding to the fact that G2 may not have taken Mad Lions seriously, and obviously the first time around. We saw some tweets about that, and it's hard to tell sometimes with G2 because they always act like they're trolling even when they're not, so you don't really know, like, you don't really know when, it's like the boy who cried wolf. You're not necessarily sure when it's legit or not. And I think that I don't know if they just said, like, okay, we're just not going to do anything when prepping for Mad Lions the first time. I think that's BS. But I think they actually did take it at least some amount of seriously. I don't think that coming into the playoffs originally, they thought they could lose to Mad Lions. That part I think's right. I do think that they took prep seriously. I do think this team has good work ethic. So I won't say that they just threw it away altogether. I think that they will.
I also think that Mad Lions took their prep seriously is more.
But they have to, right?
Thing.
Like,
yeah.
You would expect that out of Mad Lions if you're facing G2. The other way around, though, like, you could make the argument. I think subconsciously they didn't think that they could lose to Mad Lions in the first place. Even if they did not, like, I'm not saying they were lazy. I'm sure they put in their normal amount of work, but how serious they actually took everything, I think it will be amped up this time. This will be a G2 that does not want to be disappointed and embarrassed on the sort of stage of the stage, even if it is an online competition. This is the G2 that's won a lot of championships in the past and was a world finalist last year. So I do think we'll see the ante upped a little bit for them. My biggest question now is how they will play around the map. We saw in the first Mad Lions series that frankly, Caps looked awful. Like, on this show, I called him Craps after that series, like, in jokingly, because, like, he just looks so
not after the match against Origen, though.
Right, he looks so outclassed. Like, I sort of see 80 carries as a lineage here, and I don't know where to put Caps in this because, he's new to the position, but, like, there were, like, the 80 carries of old, Reckless, Forgiven, etc., right? And then there was Upset. He sort of was the next wave. Well, like, Carzzy is even the newest version of that, right? Like, he's like this platonic ideal of just, like, amazing young 80 carry that will push the league forward one day. And we saw that, right? Like, it wasn't all him. And they definitely played around the map with Caps. But I definitely think that overall, Caps they definitely need to play the map differently to favor him and put him on the strong side of the map. Mm-hmm. Because I think at this point we know that he is not fundamentally as good of an AD carry as some of the people like Carzzy.
Tyler, the thing, like, obviously we're in this situation because Fnatic was able to sweep Mad Lions, right? And it was impressive for Mad Lions to beat G2. No one is disputing that. But then after you see a performance like that, you got to wonder, was it Fnatic just being so good or Mad Lions missing opportunities? Like, how do you assess Mad Lions based off of that Fnatic series going into this G2 matchup?
It's really difficult to equate how really the hierarchy right now in Europe is, because looking at the G2, just the G2 Mad Lions series, looking back at that one, that series reminds me of, you're a UFC guy, you like MMA, Arda, you've commentated UFC and done analysis work on ESPN for the UFC. Sometimes there's fighters who are overconfident and they're going to swing. They're going to go into the octagon and they're just going to fight it out. They're going to do, a drunk brawl, essentially, and they're going to leave themselves open. And that's what G2 did against Mad Lions in their first series, right? Where they could have played a defensive style. They could have played a smarter version of their style and won that series, I believe. But they basically said, hey, Mad Lions, let's just swing. We're online. We're in our pajamas. Let's just have fun, and we're going to just battle out right here when we're swing. And look what happened. They get up 34 kills in the game 5, and they lose. And they look sloppy, and they look dejected, and they didn't look like themselves. Looking at Fnatic seems to have taken this step very similar to Cloud9 in NA, where they're taking this seriously. They've looked as good or even better online as they were offline, and we saw it in Mad Lions series. Mad Lions are still a team that's growing. I don't think anyone, some of us on this panel believe that they could get farther than they actually have, but I don't think anyone believed that they had a chance to make it to the finals. And I still don't think they have the right ingredients. I don't think they have the experience or the chemistry just yet to be a G2 who is going to play a different style, I believe, hopefully, in the semifinal. But if G2 does what they did last series and basically says, I'm going to put down my guard, let's just box it out, mano a mano, let's just throw rights and lefts, so let's have a mechanical war. Mad Lions has a lot of mechanically gifted players. you can't look at Carzzy and Shadow and just say these guys don't know how to be mechanically gifted. The reason why they're in the LEC and why they're such hyped up rookies is because of their mechanical skill. If you go mechanics versus mechanics against these young players, you can get knocked out. If G2 just plays a smarter style of play and they really know how to play around that mid game, where last year their true bread and butter was the mid game. It wasn't the early game, which a lot of people thought it was. It was in the mid game, they knew how to take small advantages and just push right through and then crush teams after getting a Baron or a Herald or a mid game objective. So if G2 just plays like I know they can and they don't play a sloppy drunk fight, they should win.
So Flashy said in the chat, and I made H1 also back this up, Mad Lions equals 100 Thieves, ? And I actually, that was in my brain as Tyler was talking a little bit. And what I think he means by that, and what I would agree with on that statement, is that these are teams that they did punch above their weight, respectively, right, than what we thought they would be in the preseason. And they're also teams that I think they're only going to get better with age, right? You look at something like 100 Thieves and yeah, you could probably make some changes, right, in 100 Thieves. You probably could go try to find a better mid laner. You could try to make some sort of trade. You could even go enter the Doublelift race if you really wanted to. They had the money to do it. But why? Why do you need to at this point? And I feel the same way about Mad Lions. Just take your placement here. You've done better than most people expected you to. And I think by the time summer rolls around, both teams will be progressively better, right? I think Mad Lions is already pretty good. And we compare them a lot to Rogue on this show over the past couple of months. And I think they're better than Rogue at this point, right? They are, and I think that there's still a ceiling that hasn't been hit. One thing I do want to compliment Mad Lions a lot for is their drafting has been really solid, particularly in the first G2 series that they had. Mac is a good coach. He won coach of the split for a reason. Emily, right. I see your face. So Fnatic drafting was a little questionable.
I want to hear what Emily has to say here.
I'm just saying, in the Fnatic Mad Lions series, we had a lot of pretty interesting drafts. Fnatic's drafting, they have some really interesting strong components to it. I actually really like the Maokai Rek'Sai combo. But in terms of their drafts in a vacuum, objectively are a bit weird. The big thing though that I was going to bring up later about Fnatic is that they've given up nothing in terms of what they can if they have something else it's when you see drafts like what Fnatic did against Mad Lions and even in their previous series, you either look at one of two ways. Either they can only do something weird like this and they're maybe in trouble if someone challenges them on that, or they've gone through playoffs this far without having to show anything because Fnatic, and especially with Reckless, has this really big habit of honing in on one champion he's going to play, right? So that's obviously been the Senna, even though it then ended up getting banned. Previously, in previous years, it was the Tristana, it was the Garen with the Yuumi, it was Kennen. He was a split pushing side lane Kennen. So historically, Fnatic has kind of always done this, and I do find it really interesting that they've theoretically showed very little in terms of what they might be able to do in the future. As for Max drafting, it was better, but the reason why I was actually making a face is because I actually thought some of his drafts were highly questionable mid-season.
Mid-season, sure. Yeah, but maybe the playoffs a little bit better. Right?
Yeah. Oh no, it is better. That's why I was sure. Jacob called me out for
fair enough.
I can't hide my emotions very well.
So one thing I found, and we're going to move on to G2 and Origen here because I want to get Tyler's thoughts on that series as well. But there was one comment here. Let me try and find it. It was something about Mad Lions being very inconsistent. Yeah, M. Breyer says Mad is inconsistent and they weren't playing at the same level. So you got to think that as we will talk about G2 versus Mad Lions, the run back in a little bit, but you got to think that has to be weighing in on the mind. But let's talk about how we got there, Tyler. G2 defeated Origen. Even Carlos tweeted about it. It seems like every time we play, we win 3-1. That's the meme that's going between G2 and Origen. Caps gets his first pentakill.
Little bit of salt.
Salt, just a touch of salt.
I mean, I distinctly remember Carlos saying to us, Arda, that he enjoyed that he stole Peke's bot lane at one point also. So there's a lot of salt.
Oh, yeah.
The Origen G2 part of that is always a good time.
Anytime Carlos gets a chance to stick it to Xpeke, I'm pretty sure that wound will always be there, even if it's playful and joyful. It always feels nice, that's for sure. Caps gets his first pentakill since the switch, dominates, great series for him. Origen wins match 3, fails to go any further. What is the, I guess, the moratorium, or like just maybe the post-mortem, I should say, on Origen for this season? Do you consider it a success? What do you think, Tyler?
I'd love to sit here and be like, Origen wasn't who I thought they were. Like they changed, right? For better or worse, you would want them to be like, hey, this team got better, or they evolved, or they got worse because they evolved. It really does feel like they were who they were the entire season, and I've said this many times on the show, is that they're a very, very good team, but I don't know if they're a world-class, like, top 8 team. And I always said they're the gatekeeper, right, where I can see them at Worlds. I can see Origen at Worlds, but I don't know if I can see them making top 8. And if they do make top 8, I don't know if they're the team that I would see making a run, right? And I think this series just kind of exemplified that, where they looked good, and they pushed back versus G2. They didn't get run over by any means, but they didn't really evolve. They kind of always did what they've done the entire years, where they put, upset on a late game champion. They give, Alfari his Renekton if they can, give him a lane bully, try to push through top, and giving Mage shoot Nuke Duck, and they try to get to that late game with a team fight. And I don't feel like they evolved as a team that much throughout the season, and we are at a point now where they finished in 4th place. That's good. Like, they are on the cusp of going to Worlds. They are a very good team that might go to Worlds. But I still am lacking that oomph, right? Like, Mad Lions, for how consistent they are sometimes, I feel like they have that X factor. And I think Jacobs brought this up before, where you feel that they have the it factor, where they could go to another level. Where with Origen, they are a solid 8, like a 7.58, and I don't feel like they've gone above that 8. Where Mad Lions could be a 5, but they've also had 9 or 10 performances.
I feel like Origen is very similar to, like, maybe there's some basketball fans in the chat, Philadelphia 76ers of last year, right? Like, not the current one, but the one of the previous season, right? Like the Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris roster, where, like, you got all these superstars. Like, everybody was on their own good team. Xerxes was on Splice. He was fantastic. Same with Upset. He was on Schalke. It was fantastic, right? And then you bring them all together, and it's just like, look, I want the word failure is not correct, because I look at something like Excel is a little bit more of a failure of, like, we thought they made a lot of off-season moves that thought would, push them over the edge into playoffs finally. They laid the bad egg, right? But with Origen, they didn't succeed, but they didn't fail, right? Like, they just did all right, right? Like, I don't know. I don't think that they would be, I don't know what the ceiling is. They certainly haven't at this point, like, hit, I think I agree with Tyler, like, they haven't hit much higher than the range than they can, I don't think. But like, these are some of the best players on their respective team last season, and it just didn't seem like it worked.
By the way,
I think they're incredibly disappointed, actually. Like, I think they're really disappointed, because, like, this is a roster that we talked about how different teams were going to try to go up against G2, right? And we talked about Mad Lions and how they're just like, okay, well, we're going all in on rookies, and people weren't really sure how that was going to work out. And you see this team that is, again, very inconsistent, but also incredibly dangerous. And Origen basically said, we're going to build this lineup. We're going to put a little bit more resources and money and attention into, like, larger names. And we're going to try to win that way, right? Because G2 is always kind of just sitting there as, like, the ultimate roadblock, considering their dominance over Europe for the past few years. But and I do think that this is, like, really disappointing for them, especially to see Mad Lions go ahead.
Yeah, it has to be, because Origen was battling for a top 2 spot all season long.
But that, like, that's what I want to, like, think back here for November, the night after our free agency show. By the time we got to that restaurant, right, after the show was over, the rosters for Fnatic and Origen were fully out there, right? We knew GT wasn't making any changes. We knew it by that point, by the time we got there, that Destiny was going to be the sport for Origen, because I remember being in the car when I found that one out. And, like,
you're talking about the free agency show, right?
Right. The night, like the moments after, the hours after, right? And we all sat around that table together, and we talked about sort of a little bit of this. And I remember distinctly, though, that we thought like Fnatic and Origen are going to be number 2 to G2. And maybe Fnatic has eclipsed that, right? Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, like Mad Lions is the only one that's really thrown the wrench in that, right? And I think by the time we became more educated, because at the night of that free agency show, right, like we weren't super informed on who these Mad Lions players were. We didn't think they were a bunch of nobodies. And a lot of the people we know that do LEM or European Regional League, ERL, analysis, like we thought, or they were telling us that the players on Mad Lions were good. They were better than when we anticipated, right? Even that those people anticipated. But I still think that, like, that's why I'm saying, like, disappointment is different than failure, though. I think they can be disappointed in themselves for not achieving what they thought they should have been able to achieve, which is probably a second place or even a first place in Europe. But I wouldn't say they're a failure. They're not like Excel. I don't view them in the same window.
If their goal was to,
think they're incredibly disappointed. Yeah,
I think so too, because they probably thought that based on their regular season standing, competing for a top 3 spot all season long, they had a much better chance to get to the finals.
The Destiny hype was not, like, it didn't play out. And
they didn't evolve.
I don't want to put all the blame on Destiny as to why they ended up where they were as the 4th best team in Europe in the playoffs, right? But like, everybody was like super hype about how he did at Worlds and Scrims, and that's why he got the spot on this team, right? Alongside like the other moves on the team. Alfari at the time was like one of the best top laners in Europe. Nukeduck, I think he's incredibly inconsistent as a mid laner over his career. He's had some really high moments, really low moments, and in between is, you know, like average. And I think, you know, you saw them get upset. One of the biggest free agents last year in the offseason. You saw them get Xerxes, also high on our tier list, right? And then it was Destiny, and we were just really confused. And prior to some research, it's because this guy was popping off in scrims in Europe, right, against European teams like Origen.
Yeah, during Worlds.
Yeah, during Worlds. And so, you know, I don't want to put all the blame on him, but I think if they are looking to iterate and move forward, they definitely need a better support.
Well, we'll talk about what Origen may or may. Emily, last thought on this?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think another thing that you have to point out is Xerxes. I feel like teams have really figured out how to target his jungle pool, and his stable of jungle picks this year have been more of like the scaling farming type. I know Tyler, whenever he brought up Origen, he'd always categorize them as like the boring team because
they're very boring.
They would like, you know, they typically have a farming jungler, and
Team Resident Sleeper.
Xerxes is not in lanes frequently. I think there was that one game where I forget who they were playing, but he ganked like level 3 topside, and I was like, whoa, what is going on? So I think that's another thing that they might want to look at in terms of maybe diversifying what he is doing in the jungle, really maybe over focusing on topside, since Alfari has been such a like phenomenal player all split.
He doesn't need the help.
It's not that he needs the help, but it's more that like if you want to focus something in this game like early,
quicken the pace.
Mid topside is the way to go in my opinion, especially given Upset's strengths and like micro team fighting abilities.
Let's talk about the matchups that remain. Mad Lions running it back with G2. So Jacob, can a Mad Lion squad that have shown flashes of brilliance once again defeat G2 now in an elimination scenario, fresh off of tasting defeat against this team, probably more motivated than before? Can that happen?
I don't know if Mad Lions is more motivated than before. G2 is definitely more. Again, I don't know if motivated is the right word. Rather, versus like them taking it more seriously. Like I said earlier in the show, right? Like I think that they sort of brushed it off. Not that they didn't do any prep or that they were lazy, but I seriously think that no one on G2 thought that they could lose to Mad Lions the first time around, right? This time you know you can because you already did. So like you got to stare it right in the face and go, all right, well, this is like a real possibility here. I do think that like the first series, it does come down a lot to draft. I think that Mac actually like deserves that Coach of the Split award because I think he's one of the better minds in League of Legends in Europe, right? Like really smart and gets it. And he like just particularly in the game 5 that we saw early, right? Like in the first series, like he outclassed G2 in draft very significantly. And I think that this game will come down to that also. You know, I think and Emily is our resident jungle expert here, but I do think that this is a very jungle-oriented matchup when I look at it, because like Shadow has been incredible. Definitely, I think like was among the finals voting for Rookie of Split. Probably even deserved it. You can make that argument on his behalf. Same with Carsey. But yeah, I think that when you look at this matchup, it's like jungle can really flip it on its head in terms of early game momentum. Both these junglers really, really like to push early. Yako's the first blood king of many, many years in that title in Europe. Very good at sort of getting a lane advantage when it's needed. And I think that Shadow's got to counter that. So I think that I would give the edge to G2 here, because I do think they're going to take it a little bit more seriously than they did the first time around. But there is a possibility here that Mad can win, and I think it comes in drafted jungle.
Tyler?
I would just advise for G2 not to slug with them. I know G2 loves to be a bit sloppy early, and they've shown that at Worlds when in the group stage where you had those games versus Cloud9 where it was literally just them just trading like 20 kills in the first 10 minutes, and then they're like, okay, let's turn it around in the mid game. We'll suppress them there, and we'll take over because we're better than them. With Mad Lions, I do not want to see them do that. I want them to play smart, and I'm not saying that means play slow, but I'm saying play smart. I know, don't open yourself up. If you don't open yourself up and start slugging with Mad Lions, I don't want to say there's no way that G2 can lose if they play that way, because Mad Lions is improving, and they're a team that has a lot of really good young players who might one day be the next Perks or Caps. But if G2 just takes this game and they breathe and they take it slow in terms of like mindset, not in terms of gameplay, and they kind of just go with the flow and they focus on that mid game where they are, I mean, arguably the best mid game team in the world, in my opinion, they can win the series of 3-0. They just can't put their guard down, because they put the guard down, they can get knocked out again. That's what happened in the game.
The first time we saw these people match up in the quarterfinals, right? Like it looked, or in round one, it looked like it was an LPL game. And I said that previously, right? Like it was just this, like early like brawling.
Yeah. Don't dive into the mud. Do not get into a mud fight with
Speaking of
right. Well, I mean, like both these teams enjoy their mud fights, Tyler, right? Like it's very apparent that both of them like the slog. I think the big thing here is that it actually benefits Caps to not play like that early, because like clearly he's not very comfortable as an AD carry in terms of big moments, right? Like we've seen him break down in really important games throughout the season and throughout the playoffs. So don't do that, because I think and play around Perks. That was the next point I was going to make. Perks is better than Humanoid, and I don't want to not that Humanoid's a bad player, but he is better than Humanoid.
I mean, Perks is like arguably the best player in LEC and like one of the best players in the world.
That's true.
Yeah, and it's impressive that he's been able to do it in 2 roles too. But I think that like Perks is better than Humanoid, so play around him. If you want to push a lane advantage, if you're Yonkos, push that lane advantage in mid lane, because that's the one that I feel is best. Unfortunately, there may be a position in time, right, where where I see that Caps gets a little bit behind, and they're going to want to feel the need to give him some gank pressure, but they shouldn't. I definitely think that they should just try to focus on Perks and push Perks forward.
Fnatic awaits the winner of G2 and Mad Lions in the final. Emily, based on what we've seen in the playoffs so far, Fnatic have looked the best. They definitely dispatched of Mad Lions quite easily. But if G2 or Mad Lions make it to the final, or when G2 or Mad Lions make it to the final, do you see either of them contesting against Fnatic?
I think the G2, so the thing that I'm anticipating is the G2 Fnatic matchup. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I thought Fnatic took some interesting things out of G2's playbook and kind of made it their own with trying to control multiple neutral objectives early in the game. And that doesn't mean that they were like, doing crazy level 2, level 3 ganks necessarily, but it's just more about how they were splitting the map. They were, in some cases, using TP pressure because, Hillsong took TP in game 1. They were doing a lot of things that I think G2 likes to do, albeit in like a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting, and it makes me very excited for this potential G2 Fnatic rematch if it happens. I think that to our previous points with G2 taking on Mad Lions and kind of why I think that they'll be able to come out on top is I think they're just going to be coming in with a little bit more of a determined mindset, I guess. Despite the fact that I think they were the better team even in their first series, despite the fact that they lost. And then additionally, I think that based on Fnatic's drafting and focus, it just feels to me that Fnatic has been pressured to show very little in these series, especially draft wise. So while you can say you can look at their early game and really specific things about how they're trying to split the map, how they're trying to control neutrals like Herald and Dragon through Scuttle control as well, and how they're pressuring side lanes, and take all of that and then look at how that has been, theoretically preparing them to, face G2 again. Because the last time they went into a match with G2, we're like, this is it. This is Fnatic's time. And, it did not happen. So I'm really, really, really curious about that matchup and that rematch if it happens.
So before we get thoughts from Tyler and Jacob on the final, let's go through the brackets because we all pretty much had what it seems like very similar paths, at least a very similar final. So here's mine. This is actually my LEC bracket here, as it'll come up on screen in just a second here. As you can see, I had G2 and Fnatic with G2 winning at the very end there. Let's move on to Emily's bracket. However, Emily, you just talked about the final preview there, but just give us some cursory thoughts on if you're happy or not based on the predictions you made at the beginning of the playoffs.
I mean, I'm happy I was wrong about Mad Lions, right? Because they're such an interesting story. And since their first, game against G2, all the way back at the beginning of the LEC split, I've been really curious to see how this team would grow and evolve because they seemed to already have a really good early game strategy against G2, all the way back again at the start of the spring split, and which seems like years ago at this point, to be honest.
It really does.
But so I mean, I'm happy to be wrong because watching Mad Lions improve and evolve as a team has been just a real treat to watch.
Jacob, let's look at your bracket here, and you can give us your preview of the final as well.
Yeah, I thought the Mad Lions would, like I said last week, I thought Mad Lions would punch above their weight in this playoff. I did not get all the matchups right. I thought G2 would advance through the winner side of the bracket and not the loser side of the bracket, and obviously they find themselves on the inverse now. I do think that G2 will come out above Mad Lions, although I think we could see a 5-game series here of sloppy, very, very sloppy play if we get into the LPL style dogfight that may occur, which I'm all for. I enjoy watching LPL games and when other regions try to imitate them in that regard, whether either intentionally or not. But the LEC has lost to the LPL enough times at Worlds that maybe they just want to imitate them at this
point.
So final prediction, Jacob.
My final prediction is the final will be Fnatic versus G2, and I think that Fnatic will 3-1. Actually, I'm gonna go against my
so you're doing the switch now.
This is the Fnatic. This is the Fnatic time. I think. I really do think that. I agree with Emily. I don't think they've shown the entire hand, and they do have a trap card, and I'm wondering what that trap card will be.
I still have them losing though.
I just want to say that I'm proud of myself for being 100% on all my predictions. I've got nothing wrong so far. I've been picture perfect with every single prediction. So continue with my perfect predictions.
Man, Rogue looks great in the semifinal there, by the way. It's just beautiful.
I mean, sometimes in life, there are good times and there's bad times.
Your hair is going to experience one pretty soon.
John's son got robbed, by the way. We're going to talk about LCS MVP later.
He got robbed.
Some people are robbed. I mean, I'm just saying, some people got robbed. I mean, so Rogue didn't work out. Johnson didn't really work out. TSM, they didn't work out. But I can guarantee you, with 100% prediction rate skills, that G2 will win the final 3-2 over Fnatic. Quote me on this. I have never been wrong.
Ever. And his hair changing in a matter of weeks does not dispel that whatsoever. Okay, people? Let's just be very clear on that. You know what else is clear, by the way, and this just happened? C9 Academy just won the LCS Academy Spring Split Championship. 3-0 sweep. Can I just point out that it's not Dignitas that won this? Can I just say that, please? Based on their roster going into Academy this year? Like,
Dignitas's roster was, in Academy sense, it was a roster with a very high floor, very low ceiling, where they have a lot of their players have already maxed out on what you think their potential is. And then you look at Cloud9 Academy, where they have King, who was at Worlds last year, who was incredibly good, who I think I even talked to a few players during the play-in stage, and they're like, oh yeah, this kid's really good, in Oceania, he's internationally good. Like, if you give him a good prep and give him a good infrastructure, this kid could be a special talent. Fudge also came on strong throughout the season, another Oceania talent. Palafox deserves to be an LCS. I'm telling you this to every single LCS owner in the league who maybe might have made playoffs this year. Get Palafox. Don't import another South Korean or European mid laner. I know you can't because of the pandemic, but just be smart for once and just take Palafox. Get him. He's really, really, really good. And I know he's only you're only seeing it now because he's on C9 and they know how to develop talent, but Palafox has always been a special talent, and he will be either on C9 in a year or two when Niski gets, because Cloud9 is very...
When
they're not
Team Liquid pays,
buy low, sell high.
When Team Liquid pays a bucket load of money to recruit Niski or something like that.
Yeah, they bring a Palafox and
What I'm saying is, though, I mean, Dignitas Academy had 27 years of LCS experience between all of them. I mean, when you look at that and you're just like, well, a team of LCS hopefuls win Academy, as they should. I'm just saying, you look at that and you're like, how do you not just burn it to the ground?
It's
good to the players, but
that's good though.
It's good. It's good for Academy.
It's good. It is good for Academy.
I actually think a player Tyler didn't mention is Diamond. I think.
Diamond's really good too. Yeah.
Really good.
So I think, to your point, the burn it to the ground point, I think we will see the Dignitas Academy roster burn to the ground, but not because of performance, because
of money.
Yeah, because they paid Mr. DeMonte after not taking his option for LCS level money. They went back and paid him on a brand new contract for LCS level money to be the mid laner for an Academy team.
And he was good. DeMonte was not the problem at the time.
And he dissuaded him from joining teams like Golden Guardians this past offseason by paying him LCS level money and more money. And now we see Dignitas in some financial straits by trying to dump Huni, and their parent org has a bunch of money problems that Emily brought up last week. So I think we will be in a position where the very expensive Dignitas Academy roster is burned to the ground pretty shortly by no fault of performance.
So we're going to shoot over to the LCS now. This is the Rift Rewind, an ESPN League of Legends program. Arda, Tyler, Emily, Jacob with you usually every single Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. However, we are doing a special playoff edition, and that also means we will be live at 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday before the LCS Finals for a 60-minute program. By the way, the remaining two matchups, FlyQuest versus Evil Geniuses, will be available Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2, on ESPN Television, and on the ESPN app, as well as the championship on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Cloud9 awaits the winner of that one. So let's take a look at the bracket. How have we got here so far? We'll talk about our specific brackets a little bit later on, but this is how the LCS Spring Split playoffs have shaken down. As you can see, 3 teams remain: Evil Geniuses, FlyQuest, and Cloud9. Some are surprised by this, others not so much. Maybe FlyQuest a little bit more than Evil Geniuses, especially if you take a look at the month of March. But let's take a look at some of the takeaways that we have taken from the round 2 matches, particularly Cloud9. Tyler, I mean, you've been saying this. You've been beating this drum all split, and I'm pretty sure no matter what I ask you about Cloud9, nothing's going to change, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is over. Just give them the trophy. If C9 loses the biggest choke in domestic ever, any domestic season, Korea, China, NA, Europe, there would never be a bigger choke. They have to win. They've lost 6 straight finals as a franchise. They are far and away, head and shoulders, levels above every single team in this league. It's not even. It's a joke. I mean, EG and FlyQuest are good teams. They are good teams. They are good North American teams. C9, I believe, can be a great world-class team. They have that potential. Blabber has evolved into a world-class jungler. As Reaper said in his MVP video for Blabber, who just got awarded MVP, he thinks Blabber could be one of the best junglers in the world. And I agree. I've said this even before this season. I said Blabber's always had the potential. If he has the right infrastructure, right coaching, he gets there. C9 cannot lose. I know it's online. I know it's a different format. I know the pandemic. I know we talk about it all day long. They cannot lose this final. There's never been a more important match for C9 because they have to win it. There's no other option where if they lose, it's an embarrassment. They are so much better than every other team left in this tournament. C9 will win. I have 99.9%. 100%. It's over. Just let's move on. C9's going to win the championship.
You're giving out a lot of guarantees on this show, Tyler. I appreciate it. I love stamps of
no jokes. No, I'm looking to the camera. No jokes. No me. No anything like that. C9 will win the championship. There's no other option that's possible. If they lose, it's the biggest choke in League of Legends history. They have to win.
So, Emily, let's go back to what Tyler just said there about the MVP. Blabber becomes MVP. We knew that it was going to be a Cloud9 player, but you are maybe at least a little bit surprised that it's not Niski.
I am surprised it's not Niski. That's actually not to take away anything from Blabber, and I think people maybe took a tweet I made earlier the wrong way because I'm not trying to slight Blabber at all. I think historically, if we look across Niski's career, I think Peter Dunn actually tweeted this as well. You look at the junglers that Niski has worked with, and he has a pretty good habit of kind of having an MVP jungler alongside him as someone that people praise, yet don't actually award an MVP to. So part of it is that, like, I think ideally, and we've talked about this in LCK actually with like BDD and Clid specifically, but I think Blabber and Niski have a little bit of like BDD Clid in them where they're both performing so well and their performance is so symbiotic for the team. So not only are they benefiting from having strong lanes on the side lanes around them, but Niski does a ton for Blabber by creating pressure so that Blabber, if he wants to farm and he doesn't want to be in lanes early, he can. If he wants to go to side lanes early, he can. If he wants to reward Niski for his dedication to his jungling cause, he can go mid. And I think vice versa. You see that Niski helps Blabber out a lot, and you see that Blabber helps Niski out a lot. So I do think the fact that it wasn't closer is a surprise to me, for me personally. And there will be an article for me coming out tomorrow just involving an interview with Niski and his career, because I actually fully expected him to be MVP. I think that Niski really deserved it this time around because he does so much for this team. He really has embraced the kind of play style where you create pressure mid, you push the wave, and then you go to side lanes. And I feel like we've seen so many mid laners try this, and Niski has by far been the most successful in terms of adopting it, in my opinion. Like after Worlds, everyone wanted to be Doingby, and Niski himself has said, like, I see Doingby as an inspiration. I watch his stream. And I think he's really taken that to heart and executed it at a better level than we've seen most other players who have tried to adopt that same style. I'm not including Perks in this because I think he already did that. But
fair enough.
Like I did want to call out Niski for that, and that's why he was my MVP.
And for full transparency here, we did vote Niski as a group, ESPN as a whole. It wasn't just like it was an amalgamation of people. Niski was our number 1 choice. I believe Sunday was our number 2, and I believe Sven was our number 3. So I think those were our voting choices for MVP. Blabber was our number one choice for jungler though. So
and for the second consecutive split in a row, a C9 jungler wins MVP. Last summer it was Svenskeren. And it really, I think that to Emily's point, like this is a system that allows, even last year's C9 team, obviously with a different bot lane, it allows for a jungler to truly shine, which is why I would think you see Blabber getting a lot of credit. No. I know what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, despite the changes, the system is similar, right? Like I think that it helps that you have a really strong mid laner. It helps that you get like hasn't gotten as much love this season, but I still think that he's one of the best top laners, definitely the best top laner, I think, in arguably with Sunday in North America. But Licorice doesn't get a lot of love because he's on this team with like Sven, who had the incredible first half of the split where he went deathless for a long time, right? And like got all these nods, and then Niski, who obviously is a great mid in his own right. But it helps when you're a jungler and your top and mid, or your top laner and your mid laner don't need you to constantly help them, right? Like they hold their own. We saw like the big conversation coming into this playoff was that it was going to be the Someday versus Licorice head to head, and Someday is this, like fantastic world-class top laner who, obviously had very good games previously on KT before he came to North America in the first place. Then came to North America, had a good first season with 100 Thieves, had a little bit of a down season last year, but was surging and was by most people's second choice for MVP. Yeah. Among fans. I mean, I know our chat are big fans of Someday as well, some of the regulars we have here. And that was the big thing. And Licorice solo killed him and also held his own in every other game, even when he wasn't on champions that could do that. Right?
I wish we could stream player point of views. As far as I know, we still can't, or I already would have done it for an analytical stream. But Licorice, if you ever want to learn the minutia of top lane, watch Licorice's.
The sad thing about that,
there's a lot of things you can point out in his pro view that are really, really good.
I know that we were basically thinking it was a foregone conclusion that all 5 members of C9 would be considered for MVP. And when the list of 10 came out, Licorice was the only C9 player not on it, which was man, F in the chat for that, because Licorice played great this season. One thing I do want to mention, though, just give me 1 second.
Can I just cap that point? I was just going to say junglers in this Cloud9 system thrive because they really only have one lane that really either needs the help or can snowball, and that is bot. And because you're top and you're mid, you don't have to gank them all the time because they are very self-sufficient if they if they want to be. You can gank them as a little bit of service, but you don't have to be there, right? It's not like they're demanding. There are other teams where top and mid need the help, right? This C9 team doesn't need it, and that speaks to both Licorice and Niski's consistency that have enabled Svenskeren previously and now enables Blabber.
Emily, I'm going to come to you for FlyQuest defeating TSM in just a second. There is a comment in the chat from Cookie Kitty saying, what is going to suck is people will be saying, oh, C9 only won this split because of the pandemic going on. I absolutely disagree with that. I do not think that people, if they are saying that, they're wrong. We definitely have not been saying that on the Rift Rewind. In fact, we've been singing C9's praises all season long. And when the league went online, we even tried to make the case that other teams might have a better chance of defeating C9 as a result of the online format. So for C9 to win the championship, not only dominating on LAN, going 17-1, and then going through the playoffs the way that they have, if they're continuing their dominant ways, that's just going to be a testament to them as a team. We'll get to predictions a little bit later on, but yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
I think the asterisk would have came if, so the initial plan for the initial plan for MSI was Turkey. That got changed to Los Angeles because of the pandemic and everything, and they wanted to do something just in LA. Bright Studios and the esports and the main campus is all in Santa Monica, so they could run MSI out of LA with the finals at the Forum, the legendary former Lakers home in Inglewood. And if that was the case, and let's say C9 just runs through LCS, and then you have, a Korean team, a Chinese team, if they could come, and we had it in LA, and then C9 somehow won MSI, then I think you have the discussion of, did they just win because of China not having their season disconnected, Korea, Europe, like that would have been the question of, there's the asterisk there for the international competition of them not having to travel, them being in their home city for the entire event. That would have been the asterisk. But for LCS, I don't think anyone's ever going to look back and be like, oh yeah, they didn't deserve that. I think people will be like, oh yeah, that was the season or the year that they didn't have any games because of the pandemic. But I don't think anyone's going to put an asterisk on C9 winning domestic, because they're so much better.
Now the real question is, can they keep that up until October/November? I want to, this is a prediction. Aggregators, please do not write that Jacob Wolf reported this.
They're so going to do it.
I'm logging into Reddit right now. Go ahead, Jacob. I'm logging into Reddit.
This is a prediction. I do not think MSI will happen.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah, we've said.
Oh yeah, MSI's gone.
I thought you were gonna like.
No. But if I say something that people.
Yeah.
Context,
that's also my prediction. I don't think MSI's happening. It doesn't make any sense.
I know we're veering
all
out
of us
on
agree.
context here.
No, but I want to say that. I want to say that relative. I want to make this about C9 because it's going to be like, they have to keep this form up, playing against relatively crap teams in the LCS.
Yes.
Rather than finding, the nice thing about MSI is it's always been a barometer. Right? Like, you can, if you're a North American or European team and you want to get some matchups in against an LPL, LCK team in the past, you go to MSI, you see how you did, you come back home in the summer split, or you come back, or even in this schedule, you do the second half of the summer split, and then you would know, right? You would know, like, we are bad against this play style that the Asian teams like to play. So therefore, we need to iterate and take this time to get better before Worlds.
And then the other teams get better by playing that team. Yeah.
Right. And I do not think that MSI will happen, and therefore C9 has to guess about how they can get better against international teams.
And they won't be able to boot camp too. I think that I've actually written about this in one of our roundtables. I think the biggest drawback to C9 for me is that they don't get to play against international competition, because I actually don't think there's an asterisk on this season. They did most of their like indomitable performances were on LAN. Like, they've qualified for the first place spot before the LCS went on hiatus and came back up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's an asterisk on their season whatsoever. What I do think, though, is that, like Jacob said, it's really unfortunate that they don't get to go up against international teams, because not only does MSI offer a time to face teams from other regions, but additionally, like, we don't know how boot camps are going to work. And ideally, for a team like C9, what I would want from them is I would want to see them be able to face European or South Korean or Chinese teams, like, on a regular basis over the course of maybe a month or two in preparation for a tournament, to actually be able to see where a lot of these holes are that they're not being challenged on by NA teams, and improve that way. And that's unfortunately probably off the table for the entirety of this year.
I'm going to bring it back to exactly what you just said there, Emily, but I do want to ask this because it is sort of pertinent to what we're talking about here. What is the latest on Worlds? What do we know about how Worlds would unfold, if any at all? Jacob, you want to take the lead?
They've been quiet ever since they announced MSI being pushed back to July. They've been very mum on everything, and that's something that's right? Like, it's a global pandemic, and it's changing every single day. Where some countries are getting better, and then looking in America, it's getting worse. It's a ever changing situation.
The biggest problem, I think, with Worlds this year, if it remains in China, will be visas and getting people there, because we don't know, right? Like, there are epidemiologists who theorize that the coronavirus, although it has been mostly taken care of in China, it has gotten progressively better, and the Chinese government, say what you will, has figured it out for now. But there are a lot of epidemiologists that predict that it could come back in the fall, which is obviously quite scary, that if it rose up again. But that doesn't mean it will be, just because it's taken care of in China, doesn't mean that it will be taken care of in Europe. Doesn't mean that it will be taken care of in North America, Brazil, Turkey, all these other countries that have issues with it, that will be traveling to China, presumably, to compete in the World Championship, right? And therefore, I don't know how many foreigners the Chinese government will let in their border.
I think that's
Emily, go ahead. Emily, go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. That's the big thing. There are two things for me, whether they hold this Worlds. It's not about unfortunately, and I apologize to every other audience outside of China. It's not about whether people like us, like journalists, or whether fans can travel to China. It's about whether people within China can travel in China, because I think a lot of people, again, characterize China as a monolith. It's a massive country, despite the fact that most of the major cities are still on the mid to east side of the country. Even that within and of itself is a lot of travel. So you need to make sure that people are able to travel within China. And does that require a 14-day quarantine? And then on top of that, are people able to come into the country to compete? And what do wait times look like? Because I don't see the Chinese government, even if they're going to grant visas to these teams, I don't see them suddenly being like, oh yeah, you don't have to quarantine yourself for 14 days. I think that's still going to be absolutely mandatory. So it requires a lot of time budgeting and planning. And I don't know how that's going to work for teams, because I don't know if there's a way to get that far out ahead of it. So, I mean, I think you have a lot of moving parts here. I think the can general people come to China is the least amount of their concerns. It's can you still travel within China, because that's where the bulk of the live fan base is going to be coming from.
I think
if you could even have an audience.
Right. Tyler, go ahead. Tyler.
I think Arda meant, can the teams even could C9 get to China? Can C9 get a visa to get into China to even play the tournament? That's the question, right?
My general thought is, between everything that would need to happen in order for, first of all, the containment of the virus itself and not going in waves and assuming that we can get back to normal in that time frame. I just wonder how much we're delaying the inevitable. I wonder if Worlds will even happen this year.
And also the thing about Worlds is that this was, without question, you unlike Jacob, you can quote me on this, because I've talked to the top right execs about this last year after the World Championship in Paris. This was going to be, by far, without question, the biggest spectacle in esports history. Last year's Worlds was amazing. The performances were amazing. Huge arenas, huge spectacle. This was going to be Worlds. This year's Worlds was going to be that by 10. So that alone makes it think of, even if they did Worlds, it's not going to be the Worlds they imagined, right? So in my mind, is it a thing of do we even want to have Worlds this year if it's not going to be that spectacle that they've been planning? Because from the small stuff that I've been hinted at of what they were thinking of doing would blow people's minds, and it would be something that everyone in the world.
The whole reason of having it in China in the first place. I don't think people realize how giant Tencent is, right? Tencent owns Riot Games. Tencent is one of the biggest corporations in China. And that's what I was going to say next is, if any company can do this, right, work with the Chinese government, figure it out, it's Tencent, right? Yeah. They are one of the few companies in China that has that much power on the corporation side of things. So certainly I think that they could figure it out. But I do agree with Tyler, though, in the sentiment that, this was supposed to be the blowout 10th anniversary of the League of Legends World Championship. Yeah. It was in China for that reason. They are owned by a Chinese company that has billions of dollars of access, can get them into doors with production companies and venues that no other can, right? Riot is a huge part of the Tencent portfolio, particularly because they're coming out with all these other games. Riot is very quickly becoming even more of a cash cow, right, to this mega Chinese corporation. But I agree, right? Do we just fast forward and say, okay, no more Worlds this year. Let's hope NA 2021 goes well, right?
I'm wondering how close we are to that finish line right now. I mean, we've seen the Olympics postponed. Obviously, that was going to happen in the summer, so sooner than Worlds. But major events are being postponed by 6 months, a year, and we still don't know whether those can actually.
If this Worlds gets postponed, it's not going to be in NA. It's going to be in China.
Oh yeah,
China. NA, no one cares. Riot could kick NA out. They would. No one cares about NA. It's all about China. China will get the next Worlds. I don't know if it'll be 2020, 2021, 2022. Whenever they can do it, it will be in China because they want their big 10th anniversary, the 10th one, to be in China. And I think if you just look at the numbers of, the 80 plus million who tune in to watch these finals, it's in China. NA will be looked over for China, and just look at the schedules. Like the schedules, even when they're not in a Asian region, are centered around the Chinese primetime viewership. So China will be getting the next Worlds. I hope it's this year, but I don't even know if would it be that let's just picture it, right? Like T1 versus FPX final, and there's no fans, and it's just in a empty studio, and the players can't even ooh, and there's no confetti, and it's just Faker being like, oh, I got another trophy.
But that's the world we live in, though. That's the world we live in. We just saw WrestleMania in an empty
final.
FPX T1, and you see Faker, and he lifts the trophy, and he's like that kid who won the spelling bee. He is the confetti falls, and he doesn't have any
facial
change.
Hey, don't besmirch spelling bees,
Tyler. It's just unfortunate, right? Because
it's depressing.
The International's 10th anniversary is also this year. We'd be remiss not to mention that, right? Evo has a big year ahead of it too, and all of these massive
this is affecting everything.
These are the pillars of our community, right? These are the same thing with ESL One Cologne, which now after the Angela Merkel order about large public gatherings postponed until after August the 31st in Germany, these are the events that when I see an investment deck, guess what's on them? The League of Legends World Championship, ESL One Cologne, Evo, right? Where you see these photos of just thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people gathered in these arenas, and they are enjoying themselves. These are the ones that make our industry thrive and look good and make people understand it, right? And it's really unfortunate that really the four pillars of that event, or the four pillars of that, right? Counter-Strike Majors, etc. Counter-Strike Majors, Evo, the International Worlds, etc. They're all being affected in this way, and I'm kind of the thought let's just call it a wrap, right? Let's continue to do online seasons. Let's crown domestic champions as much as possible. But if we can't go all out for these big events, let's just call 2020 a dud.
Rocket League did something similar, right? They basically divvied the World Championship money across the regionals. And that was their solution for teams competing in their regions, because they knew that they couldn't put on world championships at this time. So I wonder if that's going to happen moving forward with League of Legends. Time will tell, of course. We do need to move on. We have a lot of LCS to talk about. Emily's going to take FlyQuest finishing TSM. Jacob's going to talk FlyQuest versus Evil Geniuses. And Tyler's going to touch up on Cloud9. Let's start with FlyQuest finishing TSM in Game 5. We saw a salty run back, and then we saw FlyQuest take it the whole way through. How did FlyQuest dispatch of TSM, Emily?
Oof. So I think there's two parts to this. Also, can I just say that I think the fact that we were able to go off on this tangent is a testament to how much we all think C9 is going to take the split.
Oh, yeah.
Just throwing it out.
But it was also a good conversation.
It is a good conversation. I'm just saying, I think that there are two parts to this. One is the very obvious and visceral reaction that people were having to all of TSM's mistakes, which are not anything new. They are things that we have been saying on this show for the majority of the split. But I think if you want to touch upon things that FlyQuest did well, and in particular, we've now seen two salty runbacks go wrong for TSM, in back-to-back series, I think that speaks to the confidence of a lot of these coaches going in against TSM. And, that's because a lot of what TSM likes to do, particularly in their mid-game, is a bit predictable. The thing with FlyQuest that I really loved to see in this series was the communication and coordination between Santorin and Ignar. I think that these two, if you're looking at what's going to take this team to the next level and kind of make them that number 2 team that we identified earlier in the split before they had kind of had this weird downturn towards the end, I think it was definitely going to be these two setting the pace around creating team fights and skirmishes. We saw that with Santorin's Trundle. We see it with literally anything that Ignar plays. Obviously, like people historically are always going to point out like the Thresh and the Blitzcrank, but like he is, like these two are when they're coordinating really, really well, and when this team can fire on all cylinders, it's these two. They're creating skirmishes. I do think I would be remiss not to mention Solo's return, obviously, because he, I think, has been a really large component into how this team has performed as well, just because he's been a lot more stable in the top lane. Like that's, I don't think he's like taken over games necessarily, but he's been a lot more reliable, consistent, and stable, which in turn has affected how they've been able to, again, set up these skirmishes, really, really pick apart what TSM like to do in the mid game. I think we also saw them in a few of their early games really forcing TSM to opt out of going topside, which is what they've liked to do, especially in game one, I believe. Dardoch instead had to go bot side because of an invade that Santorin did, where I believe he went red to red, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Someone can correct me on that, but I'm like 90% sure that was his path. Sorry, there's a lot of League of Legends games I need to keep in my head. But I think you saw FlyQuest making a lot of these like smart early game moves that were well prepared for what TSM wanted to do. Now, was it perfect on either team? No, both of these teams made massive amounts of mistakes. And I think people really like to harp on those. But in this section and on Twitter previously, I really wanted to focus on how FlyQuest did seem to be well prepared for what TSM wanted to do. They didn't always execute it perfectly, but they showed glimpses of, what this team can be as a whole.
Tyler, give people a preview of the Doublelift conversation that the three of you had that is available on YouTube, which you will watch after the LPL show. Stick around after Rift Rewind. Emily has the LPL show at 8 p.m. Eastern. But after that, go find the Doublelift video. Can Doublelift join either of these teams?
Either TSM or FlyQuest?
Yeah.
I feel like Doublelift can't really leave North America, so that really limits his choices. He's probably not going to TL. I mean, he could, but after, the Travis video and then all the hubbub about it seems like a situation that probably is not fixable if it got that far to...
Yeah, assume he's going to another team is what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, we talked about the TSM angle, right? I mean, we can't overlook that his girlfriend is the president of TSM. So
his hair yesterday on stream, by the way, he's looking a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're quarantined together, like they in a time of social distancing, they're two people who aren't social distance, right? Like, and I think the thing we both all three of us agree on is that Lena and Doublelift and Reggie, who is formerly dated Lena, they're all very successful people, and they all know how to do one thing to win.
Who has spent a lot of time around them said that like he has zero concern that everyone here could be.
They're all mature adults, and they all like one thing more than successful. And all three of them are super dang successful. You could probably say they're three of the most 10 most successful people in esports in North America. They all know how to do is to make money and win. So if they got back together and those three, and you have Bjergsen, who I'm sure after 2 years of not winning anything and kind of just because I think people forget Bjergsen 2 years ago, his stock was so high. Every international tournament was pretty much Bjergsen versus Faker, Bjergsen versus Perks. Bjergsen, he could be one of the best players in the world. He was ranked in those top 10 lists going to international events. Now it's Bjergsen. I think people talk more about his beard than his actual gameplay. And the thing is,
ouch.
No, the thing is, I love Bjergsen. Bjergsen's an amazing player, but Bjergsen hasn't had the same success in his last two lineups as he did with Doublelift. And I think while Doublelift and Bjergsen are both alpha males and they both want to be leaders of the teams, they both want to win more than anything else. So I do think TSM is an avenue. Looking at FlyQuest, I think it'd be interesting, but I don't want Turtle to get replaced by Doublelift because that's already happened on TSM. Like that would be
repeating itself.
I just want to say
real quick, Jacob, because you guys talked about this already.
Yeah. I just want to say Tyler said yesterday that he would feel really bad for Kabe. I would too.
Yeah.
I don't think Kabe works in the TSM system. I think that sort of rewinding here to why they lost. Kabe is someone I think who does not do well in the man up type of based off what I've heard about how he works in team environments of the past, right? Splice, etc. He doesn't do very well in the man up type environment, and that is what TSM is, right? Like TSM is the quintessential like you have to have very high self-esteem. You have to be pushing on the level of arrogant in some type of way to be a part of TSM, I think, and be a successful player in the system. That's why I think people like Dardoch may actually thrive, but I do think they looked very disjointed in game, but I don't think Kabe is that type of person. Generally, Doublelift is that type of person, and I think if he went back, he would gel pretty well. But it feels really unfortunate because Kabe is would be out of a job, and he took a big jump by moving to North America.
So like I said, the three of them had a conversation about this. You can find it on our YouTube channel right now, youtube.com/ESPN ESports. TSM out of the playoffs. FlyQuest move on. They will face Evil Geniuses. Jacob and only Jacob, give us your thoughts on this. Well, we're running out of time, so I'm trying to corral the troops here a little bit. Do you still hate trees, Jacob? You think this is the end of the road for FlyQuest?
FlyQuest in the chat.
You know what? I posted a Lorax meme in the past week, so I'll have you know I don't hate trees. I am the Lorax, and I represent the trees. No, I actually, I think Evil Geniuses is the better team, but I'm actually really excited for this series because I do think that there's a world where FlyQuest can take it, right? Like, I don't think that these teams are so inseparable in terms of skill that, like C9 are, right? Like C9 are like such a tier above both these teams. But I think these teams on a good day, one could take it home, right? Depending on who's playing better and who's drafting better. I would give the initial edge to Evil Geniuses. Clearly paying lots of money works. Unless your team Liquid. But nonetheless, this is the team that Evil Geniuses built. It's oddly funny that both these teams are basically knockoff C9 and have acquired either slots or players from C9 in the past. So the top three is C9 Light and C9 Yellow. And so here we are. And I think that I would give the initial edge to Evil Geniuses, but I'm excited for this one because I think that it's actually pretty close.
So the winner of that matchup will face Cloud9 in the final. Here's a question I would love to ask you, Tyler. Cloud9, obviously, we just heard what you said about Cloud9. We take a look at Solo here, by the way. FlyQuest versus Evil Geniuses in 2020. Those are some stats there. But let's get back to Cloud9 here. So clearly, C9 is the best team in the LCS. But what I'd like to know is, in your opinion, at what point in the season did you believe that to be true? And I say this because this definitely wasn't the case, at least what we were talking about at ESPN before the season started. We were saying that C9 was going to be a top team, but we definitely were not saying that they were going to run away with the LCS spring split, and they were going to be absolutely dominant, and they were going to be 17-1, and they were going to have an outer mid lane turret untouched for 10 or 11 games, and Sven was going to almost break Chovy's record KDA. Like, we weren't saying these things at the beginning of the season. So at what point would you say that you truly believed that they were just way too high of a class above everyone else?
I honestly think it was like end of week 2. It was pretty early, to be honest, because I think the big thing is that the Broxah situation, I think everyone was like the top 3 are TSM, Team Liquid, C9, and then a big gap to below them. And then you saw Team Liquid, and the Broxah visa issue pretty much took them out of the race. We're pretty much, Team Liquid might come back for the playoffs. If, Broxah comes back week 5, maybe they'll make it back in the playoff, and they never made playoffs. So they were out. They kind of imploded from there. And then TSM, even in the early weeks, they looked disjointed. They didn't look consistent. And it was a thing of C9 were smashing teams. And going into the year, my entire thing about C9 was, it was all about Blabber. If Blabber can grow into the player that I've said he could be for years, during 2017 Scouting Grounds, I was embedded with his team, which had Vulcan and Palafox, who are both now on C9. They were on T-Motion, and I followed them around for the week. And Blabber back then was very cocky. He was stomping kids at Scouting Grounds, and I remember that they were looking over replay once of him just destroying this kid who's probably doesn't even play League of Legends anymore. And Zabutin, now the coach of Immortals, basically took him down a size. Like, I actually give Zabutin a lot of credit because he actually put Blabber's ego in check a lot that weekend, and I think that set him up really well going into the academy system. And I've always believed in Blabber. I always thought Blabber was going to be something big, and I said if Blabber can become that player that I always thought he could be and become that world-class jungler, C9 could destroy the league. Blabber became that world-class jungler, and they destroyed the league. So, week 2. So I was pretty early on them.
All right, fair enough. Let's take a look at our brackets. How did we fare? How did we predict the LCS?
100%.
Let's take a look at my bracket. Mine is still intact. All right, I don't want to gloat here, Tyler. I don't want to brag, but my bracket can still play out because I said EG and C9 will meet in the finals. I was wrong about Golden Guardians. I will give you that, but EG and Cloud9 can still go. Emily is
this means my bracket is in the best spot, right?
That's correct. Let's take a look at Emily's bracket because hers is probably actually very likely in the best spot of all of us. How happy are you right now looking at your bracket and seeing that C9 versus EG is definitely very much a possibility?
I think the only thing I got wrong is FlyQuest, right? TSM beating FlyQuest, yeah. So,
and it was a 3-2 there, too. So you're only off by one game.
Well, when you get these NA teams in, like, sometimes, it's just going to be a little... I think I predicted 3-2 for, like, everything. I still see EG beating FlyQuest, only because, despite the fact they don't always draft to their strengths, I do think that EG has a slightly better understanding and has been more consistent, especially from mid-season on, mid-split on. In terms of how they want to play, how they want to leverage Jizuke's side lane pressure. So that's why I think they'll probably edge out and face C9. And then I really don't see any of these teams beating C9. I think another thing that we really haven't mentioned, we've like kind of alluded to it, but something I want to bring up just talking to these players, like they really want it. Like this team, like I tweeted a quote from an interview I did with Licorice where he's just like, I don't care. Like I'm at home. I don't care. Like if we're not on stage, doesn't matter. Like I want that trophy. Like we just really want to win. And I think every single person on C9 feels the same exact way for one reason or another, whether it's personal or whether they're just ambitious or it's a combination of both. This team is incredibly hungry despite the fact that they've been at the top of the LCS all year. And they really want to win. So I think that's another thing that cannot be underestimated going into this final.
Jacob, can you take a pause from writing in chat to talk about your bracket here and TSM not making it to the final here, but you were pretty close. I mean, you had EG going.
Yeah. I mean, I think I believed in TSM, but as we wrote in our roundtable this week, my sort of fears for their synergies came true. Certainly, I think that every player on the TSM team has the possibility of being some of the best players in their region. However, I don't necessarily know if they bode well together. Like I said earlier, Kabe I don't think fits in the system very well in particular. Dardoch looked, and Emily brought this up also in their own table, Dardoch looked a little lost in what he was supposed to be doing in their most recent series against FlyQuest. But I have better hopes for him moving forward in the system than I do Kabe, just because I think Dardoch's whole thing has always been that he has issues with authority, and it takes a lot for someone to gain his respect. I think someone like Bjergsen gains his respect because Bjergsen, you can say a lot of things about Bjergsen, but Bjergsen is a very respectable human being. I've always respected Bjergsen. He's grown and matured a lot as an adult since I first met him in 2014, sorry. So I certainly think that overall there's an upside here for the TSM team, but I think unfortunately it may have to come with a change.
So taking a look at Tyler's bracket here, you actually had the exact Cloud, to your credit, you predicted a 3-0 100 Thieves, 3-1 EG.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever, the TSM aside, that's still pretty impressive. I got to give you that.
So some people like to go to Vegas. Fun night. They like to take a few hours and play slow. I'm the guy who likes to go to Vegas, put 100 on black, spin around. If I lose, I walk out. That's what I did with TSM. TSM 50-50. There's a 50-50 chance that the TSM, I believe, that they could have shown themselves. And in that world, TSM does make the finals, then get slapped down by C9. I lost. It was a 50-50 bet. I still believe TSM is very inconsistent. I still think on their best day, TSM is the second best team in the league. But
I don't think that's an accurate representation of your gambling mantra. Having been to Vegas with you a couple different times to cover Evo, you like that ATM machine, my friend.
I am the best. I am the best in Las Vegas. I just let you know. Same as my prediction skills. Never wrong. Never lost a game in my life.
That tells me a lot.
Never ever.
Nope.
All right, so those are the brackets there. We have a few minutes left in the show. We got Jacob's thoughts on FlyQuest versus Evil Genius. As a reminder, that game is going to be on ESPN2 and the ESPN app as well, 4 p.m. Eastern Saturday start. Tyler and Emily, why don't you give us your predictions for that matchup and how you see it shaking down? Emily, let's start with you.
I think it's going to be really close still, especially if FlyQuest play and prepare like they did in their series for TSM. I still think I'm going to give the nod to EG, but like I said, we've seen so many back and forth games, and we've seen both of these teams make mistakes either in drafting compositions and then playing them out in a way that is suboptimal, or just making general mid-game objective mistakes. So I think it's going to be a 3-2 for Evil Geniuses.
What do you think of the mid lane matchup, Power of Evil versus Jizuke? I feel like Jizuke has been on a tear, and actually a lot of that, it hasn't been as dominant in the playoffs, but the games he's played well, he's played very, very well. So I wonder if he wins that matchup.
I mean, it's going to be really interesting because I feel like people have this idea because of how EG has been using Jizuke that he can't hold mid pressure, or he can't, play Zero or stuff like that, which just isn't true. But I also think that based on it's less about the 1v1 matchup, and it's more about how both teams want their mid laners to act. For PoE, they definitely want him to sit there and hold mid, right? He's the center focus of the map. He's going to be an incredible team fighter. But you want him holding mid so that Santorin can kind of go wherever he wants. Whereas with Jizuke, what EG typically wants him to do is, again, push and get him into a side lane as quickly as possible, so they can set up 1-3-1 or 4-1 split pushes. So it's less to me about the 1v1 and more about, are these teams going to draft compositions that are fit with how they want to play, and then how are they going to execute that? So it's really going to depend on sorry if that's a cop-out answer, but it's really going to depend on draft for me, and then also how these teams start executing whatever champions that Jizuke and PoE are playing.
It's totally fine because Tyler will give us a definitive answer, as he always does. Who's going to win this one, Tyler?
I'm going to go FlyQuest. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I think the support difference is too big. I think if Ignar makes this a messy series and he makes this a series where there's a lot of skirmishing, there's a lot of rotations around the map, where there's a lot of skirmishes through the jungle, I think he's a bigger X factor over Zeyzal, who I think is a good player. And I think Jat, I believe, brought this up in a recent episode of The Dive or This or That, where he said Zeyzal has a lot of good intangibles. He's a good shot caller. He's a good leader. He has a lot of smart ideas. He's a very smart player, but mechanically, he can't stand up to a player like Ignar, who can basically terrorize the map with his skills. So I think Ignar is the big X factor in this series. I also think Power of Evil in the matchup with Jizuke, he is more consistent. And if I have to bet on one player in a best of 5 series to be consistent throughout, I'm going to go with Power of Evil over Jizuke. Okay. Also, a little teaser for our Sunday show. I just got confirmation that we will be interviewing Blabber, the MVP of the LCS, on Sunday's show. So be sure to check that out.
Nice.
Excellent. Let's go. Blabber will be an interview on our Sunday Rift Rewind program. Let's go. Okay, 30 seconds each of you. Will end on this. LEC final matches or LCS final matches, which ones will be more entertaining?
Oof.
Emily, let's start with you on this
It
one.
depends on what you think of entertaining, because I do think C9 is going to win by a pretty significant margin, where I think there's a lot more interesting to me analytically in a hypothetical G2 Fnatic matchup if it happens. So if the LEC final is G2 Fnatic, I'm going that.
Okay, Jacob?
Mm.
Pure entertainment value.
I think the LEC final, and I'm gonna, LEC final, and I think it's gonna be really close, and it could turn into a slog. I want to know what Fnatic has under the table. Yeah,
see, I like the LPL fire fist fight angle that you take there. Like, I like seeing that. Yes, I want to see Rock'em Sock'em Robots, just this. Like, just the punching like this, where they're not even no defense, or just keep punching like that. Tyler, what do you think?
I'm going to go with LCS. I'm going to play again, devil's advocate here, and say no one cares more about their domestic title than C9. They care about this more than G2. They care more about this than Fnatic. They care more about Mad Lions. No offense to the LEC teams. They want this more than anything. They've lost 6 finals in a row. Licorice, Niski, Blabber, they've all watched from the sidelines as confetti has fallen down on, Team Liquid in their reign. They don't care they're in quarantine. They don't care if they're in apartments. They don't care. They want to win this championship, and that's why I want to watch them. I want to see if C9 can finally, after 6 years of failure after failure after failure after failure in domestic play, finally win the big one. So either it will be the culmination of careers for 5 players who have never won a domestic title. Licorice, Blabber, Niski, Sven, and Vulcan. They've never won an LCS title. Sven, with one of the worst mistakes in LCS final history, in an embarrassment versus in the TSM series last year, where he lost the championship for his team. This is redemption for all 5 of these players, and they will either get that title finally after 6 years, after wanting it the entire split, or it will be the biggest choke in LCS history. So either way, they're going to have a great ending on Sunday.
So Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, and on an LEC, sure, G2 might win, Fnatic might win. If Mad Lions does make the run and does do the miracle run through the bracket, that would be an amazing story. But G2 versus Fnatic, not in a stadium, it doesn't feel right for me. For C9, it doesn't matter if it's a stadium. It doesn't matter if it's in quarantine. They want this championship more than anything else, and that's why I think C9 is the biggest story of the weekend.
We're going to wrap things up here on the Rift Rewind. Before we go, though, Emily, give us a quick preview of the LPL program that you're going to host coming up. What's happening?
We are going to look at LPL playoff teams. So the teams that are in the playoffs, I'm going to go through how they've been playing and maybe what a chance they have at taking the LPL title.
So that's going to come up. We're going to take a quick break in just a second, and then immediately after that quick break, Emily will be back with the LPL show. Couple of reminders before we go. FlyQuest versus Evil Geniuses is tomorrow, Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern. That is on ESPN2 and the ESPN app. You can watch them in both places. Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern is the LCS Championship. You can also watch that on ESPN2 and the ESPN app. Guess what? Rift Rewind. We're not done yet. Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, an hour before the championship, we will be live right here for a special 60-minute final preview of the championship. C9 versus ? We will be here, twitch.tv/ESPN esports. Quick break. Emily will be up with the LPL, but for the 3 of us dudes, we'll see you later.